All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of Leverage Lane here on the SHIPIT Nation YouTube station. Got my guy Alex Blickle here with me as always. Going to break down all things for this Week 9 slate from a single entry GPP Focus perspective, and we're going to do it the same way we always do. We're going to go down our lane, like we said. It's not Narrative Street, it's Leverage Lane. We're going to talk about ownership in a way you probably don't hear it as often around the industry. Going to talk about how to leverage the common build once we figure out how that comes together. And then at the end, we have the light at the end of the lane and our leverage lane and the lane that we'll be in this week when it comes to single entry or somewhere close to. So Alex, I'll bring you in, man. How you doing this week? And how was your week 8 as we get into this?
Yeah, doing well. My week 8 was close to being good. It was actually my worst props week of the last year and a half. Worst prop Sunday, I should say.
NFL Sunday, by the way.
Yeah, it got good throughout the week. We'll probably touch on that in a bit, but was close on the DFS side of things last Sunday. My main slate lineup had a Daniel Jones triple that did not have Jonathan Taylor, so it was good but not great. Had Bijan kind of killed it. My afternoon only lineup did really well. Won a few tickets. It was a Daniel Jones quad stack, including Jonathan Taylor, so that one did well. I had Chamari DK as the bring back, so I think that's kind of like the biggest takeaway that I had last week was, I had been sort of toying with this idea of trying to be more all in on offenses and all out on different offenses, even that seemed like they were in good spots and had multiple chalk pieces. And I actually kind of went into last Sunday thinking, okay, that's something I want to do moving forward, but maybe this isn't the week because there were offenses in just awesome spots. Like think Atlanta against Miami that it felt really, really bad if you were completely fading it. But then, man, it turned out that was the exact way to play last week. So it's going to be kind of a theme of mine that I talk about through this week. But yeah, I also thought last week was just a fun slate. It was an exhausting slate from an ownership perspective. I felt like I was uploading updates over and over and over. Hopefully we don't get that again in the next day and a half. But I really like this slate. I think the slate that we have ahead of us has a lot of really good leverage opportunities.
There's going to be a ton to talk about here. I know some people hate the slate. I'm seeing posts all over X and in Discords and things like that. People not excited about having to figure it out. That is the best part. So stick with us because that's my favorite weeks when other people struggle to figure it out. We all have the same puzzle. We all have the same game. It's the best part of DFS. So let's stick around and listen to that. If you like this show, make sure you smash the like, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel as we continue to grow this. If you like content like this and free content in general, this is the place for NFLDFS from people that actually play, which is always great when you're looking at these shows. So Alex, last week I had the Flacco stuff, comes out right out of the gate, throws Higgins the TD. I'm like, oh baby, here we go. You remember at the end of the show, I was like, I'm even adding Higgins. I'm good with this. Chase gets a million targets. What I ended up doing was actually playing that with Breece Hall and Mason Taylor and just going all in on that spot for my $100 single entry and some of my main stuff that I was in. And it did not fully work out, but it ended up being okay. But I did have a story to tell you because this is all you, and I wanted to give you props live on the show. I had a lineup on FanDuel. I played one in the Juggernaut again the week before where I'd come in and finish third place. And so I brought it back. I played another lineup in it that week. I kind of like it. It's 167 players. So anyways, I overstacked the Tampa Bay New Orleans spot in a bit of a different way, but I had Bijan and the Atlanta D and Barkley and Goddard. And I kind of went in on like 3 spots. Obviously, Barkley and Goddard, pretty good. For Atlanta, for Bijan and Atlanta, nothing. It was like the lowest scores ever. So what do I need to do? I need to late swap. Been playing DFS a long time. As of you, what do we know when $10,000 FanDuel Bijan fails is that $10,200 Jonathan Taylor is about to go off. So I'm like, how do I get him into this lineup? And lo and behold, my guy Alex, who talked me into this the week before, was Cam Ward, DK, and Io Manor with the JT run back just happened to land me on Troy Franklin, and it ended up having a shot. And people were teasing, oh, it wasn't that close. You only got like 7th or 5th or whatever it was. It's like, it was actually a catch away from 100K with Chamir DK. We'll keep running the rhyme off. That INT at the end, there's a picture of it. It's like in his hands, and then it's not. And that was he would have got the bonus, the catch, the touchdown for both of them, and that would have been enough to win first place. So I appreciate you. It turned a $0 Tampa Bay New Orleans stack late swap into 15,000 over on FanDuel. So it was a nice week overall. Came back, had a close call on the Monday Night Football slate, but we're off and running, my man. So we've got some good ideas here. I appreciate you, and I'm happy to get into them again this week. I think we got a ton of good ideas. We talked a little bit pre-show, and we'll get to that throughout. But let's start, as we always do, with segment number one, which is ownership, and looking at sort of what we're seeing out there. We've got a ton of news over the last day or two that has brought some extremely high ownership, especially as it pertains to single entry and in the higher dollar, smaller field, however you want to look at it, maybe both. What is your thoughts, and what are you seeing as far as ownership is concerned to start things off here?
Yeah, there's going to be some extreme ownership this week. I think, first of all, I think Kyle Monangai is going to be in a tier of his own. We've got him at 57% right now, and honestly, it won't surprise me if I end up with him over 65% in single entries. Next is Jamar Chase and Christian McCaffrey. So the fact that there are two over 8,000 guys that people are going to flock to is actually, keeping them in check a little bit. Like if there was no Jamar Chase on the slate, McCaffrey might be right next to Monangai. If there was no McCaffrey, Chase might be right next to Monangai. There's also Puka Nacua at 22.5%, who's holding both Chase and McCaffrey back just a little bit. So I think number one is like we're going to see a lot of that type of build, right? It's how many of these cheap running backs can I fit so that I can then spend up for whether it's Chase, McCaffrey. Some are going to try to get all the way to Jonathan Taylor. There's going to be plenty on Puka. We'll see a bunch on Jahmyr Gibbs as well. Like I actually think Jahmyr Gibbs could push 25% as the really popular sneaky guy who actually isn't that sneaky because everyone recognizes what crazy upside he has at a bit of a discount compared to those other really expensive guys. So yeah, to me, it's just it's kind of all about these running backs. And the only reason why guys like Tyrone Tracy, Jalen Warren aren't going to be even more popular, and we've got Tracy, for example, at 25%. The only reason why these guys aren't going to be more popular is because there are so many of them. So it's kind of spreading out the ownership, and it's also the position where people want to pay up. So we're not going to see, too many lineups that are Monangai, Tracy, and Jalen Warren, Monangai, Tracy, and Kareem Hunt, because some of the guys that people really want to pay up for are running backs as well. So you can't just pay down at running back and then pay up elsewhere. But yeah, it sets up therefore as a week where you can either get different by finding your favorite mid-tier guys who are 10% and might slip to 5%. It's a week where you can get different by just changing a little bit, right? So maybe instead of Jamar Chase, you play Justin Jefferson or Amon-Ra St. Brown, things of that nature. So lots of really kind of fun, exciting ways to get different in this week where ordinarily it wouldn't feel like you're doing something super contrarian if you're playing a Nico Collins, right? Like Nico Collins has gone for 28 plus in 27% of his games over the last 3 years, and he's going to be 3% owned, something like that in single entries. So lots of fun and exciting ways to build this week.
That's part of the reason I love this slate, because when you said that, it's just so hilarious to me. Is like, yeah, you talk about all this popular running backs and how people want to get to them, and literally people are rushing to go play all these guys to go play all the same guys as everybody. It's like, so let me plug in the cheap running backs, which there's definitely a guy like Monangai is a special case this week where it's obviously, a high ownership, an extreme, but that's the extreme that we wait on. Like you don't get that very often. I'm not saying just lock him everywhere, but I'm just noting that is a spot that you have to recognize. Sometimes this chalk just formulates for no reason. We talk about it a ton of the times on the show, but this is forming for a very good reason. And that's why the ownership is landing there. People can figure it out with plenty of time before the slate starts. So just noting that it's the second part where I think people mess it up. It's like, okay, now I feel so good about this, but then they go jam all the stuff everybody else feels good about. Now you just landed in the exact same spot as everyone. I'm excited that you can find that stuff and now go find ways to get different elsewhere. And again, where we say we talk about it differently than most, and this is something I don't see talked about a ton, is most people use that to say, oh, I know, let me go run it into these different plays. But for us, typically, it's going to not be about the plays. The plays are the end result of the process. The process is for me to go and find what's different on this slate. And I think roster construction is going to be what's different. I think it's going to end up being, and again, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. We'll get to the common build. It kind of formulates itself, and we'll get to our stuff at the end. But I think it's going to be some differences, whether it's a double tight end, because there's some extremely mid-range tight ends where you're like, yeah, but you got those running backs. You do. But if they get beat at 30% ownership to a tight end at the same price that fits a game stack, that could happen. Triple stacks, not triples, like quadruples. Your quarterback +3, for example, because, I'm going to play Jackson Dart and Wandale. Did you know he gets a lot of targets when this is the case? Yes, we did know. Everybody knows, but everyone is going to play Dart and Robinson and stop. And then they're dead when a 4-man stack that needs Theo Johnson and Darius Slayton and him, and they all get there. And that's a completely different build now for the type. So again, that's where I think people struggle with it. It's in single entry. Everybody only has one lineup. So I'll kick it back to you on this, and let's talk about the quarterback ownership a little bit, just so we get that, because it's obviously where people start often is for stacks. But remember last week we talked about this, and I think it was still pretty true. Is like Bijan busted. Like, yes, some chalk did, some didn't. And that's every week, by the way, but just noting it, some weeks like that in single entry, you kind of want to just look for ceiling spots, like build a construction that has the ceiling where if it really goes off and the other stuff fails, you've got a huge opportunity. That's where when people are like, you can get away with more in a single entry, you can, but versus the top score in a $20 milli maker. But what you're really thinking in the process thought actually is that you can get away with more in a single entry if the chalk busts, because the chalk is so heavily condensed that it's like, even if 1 or 2 of those spots bust, you could be way ahead of the pack with 2 to 3 outliers that end up hitting their ceiling. So you got to still build and correlate. You got to still look for opportunity, but I'll kick it back to you on that. And then let's talk about the quarterbacks after.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree there. And I'd also say this week for quarterback ownership, I think it's kind of hard to nail down because I see like this is always the case to some degree, but especially this week, it feels to me like quarterback ownership is going to be driven by where people want to go for stacks more than the actual quarterbacks themselves. So like I think the 2 exceptions are Jackson Dart and Drake May. Dart is definitely going to get plenty of ownership. I don't think May's going to get a lot of ownership, but I don't think that for May because people don't know who to stack with him. Do you go to Booty? Do you go to Diggs? Go to Hunter Henry? If you go to Hunter Henry, now you're missing out on a lot of like really kind of studly tight ends at $1,000 cheaper than what we've been able to play them at over the last few years. So to me, like it ends up okay. People like both Dart and May for how they project given their price, what their ceiling is individually. But then Dart, people actually like the guys that he's throwing to. They like Theo Johnson. They like Wandale Robinson. They like Tyrone Tracy. You can put him in a stack with Dart. We've seen how many receiving touchdowns Scadaboo had over the last several weeks. So he then becomes really popular. People don't really want to play Diggs too much. They don't want to play Booty. They don't want to play Henry. They don't want to play Demario Douglas. They don't know where the production is going from Drake May. So then he ends up potentially 5%, even though people would love to play May along with Dart. So I think Dart gets ownership. I think Caleb Williams gets ownership. The matchup with Cincinnati is great. Trey Hendrickson also out for Cincinnati. So like this awful defense, they're at negative 25% DVOA, which is on track to be like literally one of, if not the worst defenses of all time. And now they're without Trey Hendrickson. So we definitely want a bear in some way, I think. Yeah, do you play him with Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Olamide Zaccheaus? How important is it that Luther Burden is out? I don't really know. And then the other option you can do is you can just flip it. You can say, okay, I'll play Monungai and Odunze or just Monungai and then use him as a bring back to Flacco stuff. So I think that if Flacco gets that full bill of health, he actually could end up as one of the more popular quarterbacks. I really want to kind of watch out for his steam. I know right now I'm well over industry on his ownership projection at just 8%, but that might go to 12%, 15% if I'm seeing the steam on Chase and Higgins the way I think we might. I don't know if people would be okay just playing Flacco with Chase. So to me, like the big indicator is what am I seeing on Higgins? If Higgins is getting any kind of interest, the vast majority of that interest is going to be double stacks with Flacco. So that would make me bring Flacco way up as well.
Yeah, I don't see him getting a ton right now, but I think like you nailed it. If people go there, I feel like they go there, and that's the setup. I did see some of the stats posted about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and the records and different things like that. Like Higgins, I think needs 45 yards or something like that for the 5K. But people forget too, like that's, first of all, it's not week 17, week 18 where we're talking money incentives, but also, again, he's going to get that at some point. I don't imagine T. Higgins is not going to catch 45 more yards in his career in the NFL. So I don't think it like that type of stuff. It doesn't mean it's happening this week. It probably does, but it's also like it could be the last week. He had a 44-yard catch for a touchdown, and that was it. That's not enough to do anything for you in tournaments. It's helpful, but I can promise you from my own lineup last week, it's not enough. It was nice that Breece Hall wanted to add to that total at a lower ownership. But let me just add a few more things quick, and we'll round this up and get to the common build and how the chalk is connected. But one thing that's interesting, tight end, pretty spread out, I think. Even defense, I think on defense, you could see, the Chargers and the Rams pop up a little bit for the expensive ones, maybe the Giants for the cheapies, but I think we'll see that. But there was something else I want to talk about. Oh, yeah. Do you think Caleb gets some natural boost? I know you mentioned him coming in kind of like second to Jackson Dart, but I think that's also because you could pair him with Monangai, but there will also be people that want to leverage Monangai through the passing stack and the fact that Burden's already out. And I think you can do that. And there is different ways. Like if you have a Odunze and a guy, I like Loveland last week. I think OZ, I think he was questionable as well, but seems to be fine now. So if you got Zacchaeus in there, there's definitely ways to go with the Caleb stack cheap. Again, maybe it's a quadruple stack that includes Monangai, but I'm just saying as ways to get different, whether leveraging him or not, I think that could boost him some. I also want to say, and then kick it back to you for thoughts on this running back stuff. I feel like Tracy, because of the Dart stuff, could end up actually getting held in check, just not being the one that's boosted. Because if you put Monangai with, call it CMC for ease of use, because it's most likely, there's only one more spot that you can play a running back. So and then you have a roulette wheel of all these different options that we've talked about. So I feel like Tracy's more held in check. And then the guy I think could roll back a little bit or moonwalk, as our late friend Degenerate 75 would say, shout out to him. He would say moonwalk back is Jaylen Warren, because how does he get in there? Like if you still have Kareem Hunt in a reasonable price range where, remember, if people are on Jackson Dart or Mahomes or whatever, Jackson Dart or Caleb Williams, and they're not on Mahomes, they may want a piece of that game. And I doubt it's from the James Cook side. We saw that worked last week when people didn't want him, worked out pretty well. But just noting it, I think when you think Hunt is in the mix and he's only 4,700, and then you think about Tracy at least being somewhere in that realm, I got to think Warren just comes back a little bit. What's your thoughts on Jaylen Warren here at 5,500 and any of the other stuff I mentioned there, quarterback and whatnot?
Yeah, very much agree. I only have Warren around 15%, and that could honestly come down even further. It's not just that you've got Hunt down there. It's also Kamani Vidal against Tennessee with his backups out. That's a phenomenal spot. People are going to go there. You got James Cook coming off a huge game. You've got Jahmyr Gibbs, as I mentioned, Bijan Robinson. People are going to want to try to get to Jonathan Taylor if they can afford him at $9,800. You've got Chase Brown in the matchup with Chicago coming off one of his better games. There are just so many ways that people can go at running back. And I think we're also going to see a fair amount of double tight end because, I'm above market on Kittle and Bowers especially. But George Kittle, 4,800 in a good matchup. Brock Bowers, potentially healthy at $5,000. Like, these are not prices that we have been able to play stud tight ends at in probably 4 or 5 years. And, the stud tight ends got to $6,500, $7,000 for a reason. It's because we kept playing them and we kept benefiting from them because they give you a ceiling that the cheap guys just can't ever provide at the position. Whereas, every now and then you're going to find an Alec Pierce or a Chimere DK that gets you access to a real ceiling at the wide receiver position from down in this cheap range. You can't usually get that from the tight ends because even if they score twice, it's like 4 for 40 and 2 touchdowns. That doesn't get you that 25-point explosion. So, yeah, I think we could absolutely see a lot of double tight end this week, whether it's Kittle and Bowers. I think we'll see a lot of Theo Johnson paired with Jackson Dart. The Niners especially, they have struggled immensely over the middle of the field. Last week, it was something like 10 for 10 for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns over the middle of the field against them, something like that. It's been all Theo Johnson and Wan'Dale Robinson over the middle, so it's no surprise that those guys are getting the attention they're getting this week, but I also think that they're in a really good spot. So if you want to play dart, I think you just have to overstack it. Like for me, like I'd probably go dart with Wandale, Theo, and Darius Slayton. Give you that, get yourself that access to the explosive play with dart and kind of just go all in. But yeah, I think everything else I'm in agreement as well. I think Tyler Warren could get some ownership. Travis Kelce could get some ownership. Tucker Kraft, Ronda Gadsden. But the thing is, like, because all of these guys are there, even if someone steams to the most popular, like it's probably getting to 20, maybe 25%, not 30, 35. And it also means anyone who does steam, there are also some really, really good explosive names like Kraft, Gadsden, whoever, that's being left behind, probably sub 10%. So the tight end position and the running back position, I think, could take the vast majority of the flex this week. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if we see something like 60% running back in the flex, 25% tight end in the flex, and 15% wide receiver in the flex, or something kind of crazy like that.
Yeah, which we'll talk about later when we, in segment 2, when we get there. Before we get to the segment 2, where we talk about the common build, how it's all connected and what we've gone through here, the last conversation, we touched on it just a little. So I want to have a further piece on this one, because I know people are wondering it, and they just got smoked by it last week in some cases. Some benefited from it, but was the Jonathan Taylor piece. He's up to 9,800 now. You made a good point there of like other stuff that we do is when you play guys and they get there and they continuously get there and crush. It's like we need to get them to these prices. We're seeing a little bit this week. We got another boost on Chase. We talked about it last week where, was the price right, or was it corrected, or was it still wrong in some places? I mean, he got 1 million targets again. So we're waiting on the Flacco bill of health, like you said, but expecting it to be there. We could see another big game for Chase. But going back to Jonathan Taylor, and the reason I thought of it is because the Tyler Warren piece is just interesting, because he's in a good spot here again, I think, too. And also, a few weeks ago when he was getting 2 goal line carries, everyone's, he should be like a 7K tight end. It's like his price is not really that high. It's 5,500. So it's higher for the tight end range. Tucker Kraft, 57, who crushed last week, and guys like Gadsden up to 5,300 now. So they are adjusting some of these prices, but still very fair. What is your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor and how he looks in these lineups? How much is it the right price, too expensive to play now? How does that work for you and your mind when it comes to single entry?
It's hard because on the one hand, like, he's doing this week in, week out, and this Indianapolis offense is doing it week in and week out. The problem that I have with it is you can't count on an 80-yard touchdown every week. And he's hit these like explosive touchdowns at such a crazy high rate. Saquon did it all year last year. It was literally a historically good season, especially from an explosive rushing standpoint. And now he comes out this year, and it was until week 8 that he had his first 20-plus yard rush of the entire season. So it's just an incredibly difficult thing to sustain. The flip side of that is, okay, that means if we're not going to Jonathan Taylor, what should we do with the offense as a whole? And so to me, like the big mistake that the field seems to be making this week is that nobody is then going to the passing game, where if Jonathan Taylor is going to be less than 10% owned, what are you saying? You're saying, okay, Jonathan Taylor's not going to repeat this, 150-plus yard, 3 touchdown week every single week. But if that's the case, then think about what that leaves for this Daniel Jones offense, because the Colts just keep putting up points over and over and over. They're succeeding through the air. They've been a historically good first down offense from a yards per play standpoint. I think they're like second best in the last 50 years or something like that. So they're going to continue to score. Pittsburgh boosts opponent play volume more than any other team in the league. So this Colts offense should run a lot of plays. Fantasy production is going to come from them. If you're saying that Jonathan Taylor can't get there because he's just too expensive, then I think you should be saying, or you should at least be asking the question, what happens if Jonathan Taylor doesn't have a multi-touchdown game this week? And to me, the answer is, all right, this Colts stack goes crazy. So to me, like, one of the two is without question drastically underowned. Either we should be doing more to get Jonathan Taylor in and hoping that he just continues it. And you make this point all the time. Like, we don't need 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. If he goes for 150 and 2, it's not quite matching what he's done in the past few weeks, but it's still great. It still could be the best running back score of the week by 5+ points. Mm-hmm. Or we should be saying, if I'm not going to Jonathan Taylor, I'll just stack this offense.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think you nailed it, but also, like, I don't think people look at that enough. And I try and explain this all the time to people, going through it with them, is it's fine to say, I'm not going to get to JT this week because he's 9,800. He doesn't fit my builds. Think about what you always say. They'll say to me, they'll say, Tambo, you always say there's like 9 good options on the slate. Like there's tons you can find instead. Yes, all true. But then what does that mean? So step 1 is that you've decided that. That's part of staying in your lane is making a decision. So that's your lane. That's fair. Second lane, or second, whatever, you're moving up in the lane now towards the end of it as we get through the show. Okay. Well, let me look at the Colts then. What's going to happen here? Well, they're facing a terrible passing defense. Like literally, what would be the difference between Aaron Rodgers versus Joe Flacco and a 60-plus points scored and Daniel Jones versus Aaron Rodgers this season? There's tons of opportunity. You could see it go back and forth. It's not like the Colts haven't been passed all over and broken down in a ton of different ways. So, I mean, it could be that. And then on top of it, it's like, oh, Daniel Jones, is he hard to stack? Well, wait a minute. He's not at all. Especially if I'm not playing Jonathan Taylor, I've got Pittman, Downs, Pierce, Warren. Is there other guys? Yes. Could there be other guys? Yes. But is it easy to stack up? Yes. Is the pass defense horrible? I'm looking at the Stone over at SHIPIT Nation. It's horrible for the Steelers. Like you could definitely see this go back and forth, but it's when people decide no to something, they don't go down the extra part of the road, the lane, and say, okay, I'm not thinking about the rest. Now, on the flip side of that, you could flip it in that same game and not changing the strategy, but just saying that's why the Warren stuff is tricky and why we mentioned it earlier. And even on the other, like, okay, if I was going Aaron Rodgers, is it Metcalf, Austin? We've seen this kid, Roman Wilson, get more involved. Oh, I would have loved the tight end against the Colts. We saw guys like Gadsden just light them up and others. And then it's like, oh, but wait, Freiermuth is healthy now. And they've got Jonnu Smith and, the only guy that can break the Gen Z 6'7" is Darnell Washington at 6'8" when you get into the end zone. So they literally have all these guys that they can use. And that's what makes people. So if that was your spot, that's where maybe, Alex, you say, oh man, yeah, that's, I'm not doing this, but I'm also probably not doing that. But what's hilarious is when people aren't doing Jonathan Taylor because there's so many other running backs that can beat him, it doesn't seem like they're accounting for what could be 30 points the Colts put up here. And you have to do that in this situation because there's opportunity. There's going to be points scored most likely, and there is ways to access them that are easier to figure out or more condensed than in some ranges. So just like other teams and different packages. So I think that's important to remember. Anything else you want to touch on before we get to the common build? I think it's going to be quite clear on how we kind of land on it, but anything else we missed before we get into that?
No, I think we covered it all.
All right. So let me start it off then. We've got Manon guy for sure. We've got CMC. I think we can put at least CMC in there. We'll see. Maybe you think it's Chase, Jamar Chase that is instead, but CMC fits it. And then I think it's like Jackson Dart and other, whatever else you decide. But what are you sort of seeing putting all that together when it comes to the common build before we start talking about how we can flip it and get different and game stacks and combinations and things like that? What are you seeing?
Honestly, I think you could put all 3 in there. You could start Monungai, McCaffrey, and Chase, and then say, okay, how are people doing this? And you have multiple options. You can do that with a Caleb Williams stack. You can do that with a Joe Flacco stack. You can very, very easily do it with a Jackson Dart stack. So I think from there, it's kind of just choose your fighter. But that's the kind of build that we're all trying to beat this week. I'm going to put this kind of, foundational start in where it's a really cheap, high probability play, Monungai, and then they're going to the really high probability expensive plays, Chase, McCaffrey. And then the remaining pieces are just who's the best available to fit those guys. And quite frankly, those are still good plays. Whether you're going Tracy, whether you're going Caleb Williams and Zacchaeus and Roma Dunze, whether you're going Flacco and Higgins along with Chase, none of those plays are bad. So to me, it's a hard week in the sense that what we're leveraging isn't likely to fail. And I think that's the kind of complaint that people have about the slate. It's, everything that I'm fading just kind of feels like it's stupid that I'm fading that. So I think the way to think it through is, number one, it's like, okay, well then where am I finding separation? Because let's say, for example, that you think, okay, David Montgomery is going to be 2% owned and he can score 2 touchdowns in a game. So I'm going to switch from Tyrone Tracy or Jalen Warren or Kareem Hunt, and I'm going to go to David Montgomery instead. Is he going to give you separation over those guys? His ceiling is what, 17 points, 20 points? Maybe he has, one of his better games of the last few years and it's 23 points. That's still probably not giving you the separation that you need from your lineup. So instead going to Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, like just finding that almost like second level guy, but the guy that you know that when he succeeds, when he hits, he's doing so with a score that is truly going to help your lineup separate from the rest, where you can have success even if those high probability plays don't completely fail. McCaffrey gets 23, Jonathan Taylor gets 35. That's separation, right? McCaffrey gets 23, Gibbs gets 33, something like that. That's the kind of thing I think you want to look for. Nico Collins gets you 33 when Chase gets 21. Something along those lines. Like, to me, that's how we want to approach this slate. Is we've got to find that separation from guys who have very real upside.
Yeah, and you mentioned one there that I like maybe a little later, but we'll talk through the rest of the slate here first. The other thing is, the stacks. I think you mentioned like earlier, if you go to the Chase stuff, if people are on Jamar Chase, that's why you could see waiting on the Joe Flacco news, but at 5,600, not much of a price change. Certainly a spot you could see a little bit of a back and forth. Crazy team totals for both these. Like, you don't see a Bears team total up that high very often, even when they are banged up and have some injury stuff where they're without Swift, without Luther Burden, and not like these are the game changers in the NFL. But I mean, for a team to be down those options and still see a chance for this back and forth, I think people really like that. So I think that spot could pick up the steam as far as the game stack perspective goes. Just thinking about other game stacks here. What other spot? Like, I guess the natural one to me, just based on the common build, would be Jackson Dart, Wandale, Theo with CMC. Like, that's going to be a very popular starting point, and we'll talk about ways to leverage and get different there. But that's where I think the Tracy stuff has to dial back some, or at least be kept in check, because I think people would more naturally have Monangai with CMC and then the Dart stuff over the top. And that just feels good for people in their single entry, and they're going to feel like they have everything they need, but maybe that's not necessarily what it is. What else?
Well, right on that point, like I think you're right about that, but then I also think there are going to be a lot of people who say, okay, Dart stacks are going to be really popular. I don't want to play the popular Jackson Dart stack, so how do I leverage that? I'm going to do it with Tyrone Tracy. It's kind of like the exact same thing that you talked about with Caleb Williams. Will get some ownership because people are going to choose to leverage Monangai through a Caleb Williams stack. Same idea with Tracy. So I do think he's going to get his fair share of ownership. So I talked about this idea of just going all in on offenses. So maybe the way to play Dart is to use two of his pass catchers and Tyrone Tracy, or you just say, like, I think this is kind of this applies to any stack this week. There are a lot of good options. There are a lot of easy kind of natural options that fit the natural lineup build, whether it's, going to that Chicago-Cincinnati game because you're already on Chase, whether it's going to Dart because you're already on the McCaffrey bringback and Wan'Dale Robinson, something like that. But because there are so many good options at quarterback, you should think about, okay, what scenario would allow my quarterback to actually separate? And if he separates, what does that mean for how many guys he can bring with him? So I think the worst way to approach this slate is to say, okay, I'm going to use Dart, but I'm only going to use him with Wan'Dale. Or I'm only going to use him with Wan'Dale and Theo, something like that. Or I'm only going to use Caleb with Rome, or only Flacco with Chase. You have to be putting these quarterbacks in a situation where they can separate from all the other good quarterback plays on the slate. And when they do that, when they separate, they're not just bringing one guy along with them. Dart's bringing Wan'Dale and Theo. He might bring Slayton as well, right? Caleb is bringing maybe a tight end, but he's bringing Rome. He's probably bringing at least one of DJ Moore and Zacchaeus. There's a good chance he's bringing another guy as well. Same thing with Flacco, right? Flacco's bringing Chase and Higgins. So to me, like, that's the way I want to approach this slate. I think it's a second straight week where overstacking makes a ton of sense, and it's going to be by far the best way to build. And I can almost guarantee that the Sims are going to show that as well.
Yeah, I like that perspective. Also, shout out to our man Darren, says, let's go, boys. Best DFS show out there. If you guys think that and appreciate it, make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you can get this every single week. We do a ton of free shows across the board, across all sports. And then also leave in the comments. Remember, we said this. I know right now, whoever's watching this live, you can't till it ends, but leave in the comments your leverage lane for the week. We'll get to segment number 3 here in a little bit, but we've got some more stuff to cover. I think this is important too. Shout out to our man Ryan. Appreciate you always supporting both in the NFL and golf streets, Mr. EVR. But we will say this is more a product of the reverse of what I talked about earlier with the indie stuff. So if you had said this same statement, gosh, I hope Bears stacks pick up steam, the Bears suck, then I would see where this can make some more sense, because it's like, okay, I'm not seeing any world where the Bears put up 27, 28 points on the road going into Cincy. But you're saying it. It's not coming at you, just noting it. I think you're awesome. I'm just saying, like, Caleb Williams is so stinky. Well, then get your Monangai locked in, because, I mean, how are they putting up the points? That's the same thing in reverse. You have to think about it, and you have to remember that's what you just nailed it there, Alex, with the other reverse side of where we're going to see some of the ownership steam in certain spots when people don't land on someone. And I had brought it up earlier with the Monangai stuff, is if it's not coming through Monangai, it's definitely coming through Caleb and somebody, because Caleb could run it in himself and steal from Monangai. Caleb could get it to someone, or it doesn't happen at all, which is, like I said, that's why I'd want that statement to be the Bears suck, or I'm locking Monangai everywhere that I'm playing, because that's kind of how you got to think about these situations. I will say, when you take Swift and you take Burden out of it, and there's still a great matchup here. Anybody going up against the Bengals has had a ton of fun. You talked about Hendrickson and things like that, and their different stuff that you can do against them. It's kind of condensed. Whether you can play Monangai with Caleb and try and double down that way, but you also, if you take Monangai out of it and you want to leverage him, you have Rome Odunze. Just a couple of weeks ago, he's the nuts. Like, now he sucks. Okay. You've got DJ Moore. He's been sucked all season. Only takes one good week. That's fine. And then what? Colston Loveland? Because Komet could be out as well, right? I don't know if it was official yet, but
Komet's playing.
Oh, he's in.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't see that update. That's what I was going to say. So you got either way, Caleb plus 2 to 3 guys. And then don't forget, you have to factor in price. If you're, again, talking about leveraging Monangai, who could be 60% plus in single entry, $5,700 Caleb. Even if you go with $6,600 Odunze and $5,200 more, but you've got Zacchaeus at 33, you've got Loveland at 33, who at least fits the stack. Like, there's tons of tight ends on the slate, but just noting it, I think it's important to remember, again, working backwards from what your decision or thoughts are, what does that mean to your lineup when you're building out? Like, for example, I'm definitely playing some Caleb this week, but I'll go down with that. What he gets me in those lineups is a ton of opportunity, a completely different build, and a ceiling type setup where I can still get there in other spots and have those make it up. And then I only have to count on Caleb coming through with the guys that I put him with in those stacks. Do you have anything else to add here, or any of the combinations and game stacks you're seeing that could be sort of next level or second level that we can get to on how to leverage the common build?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna talk about another one once we get to my leverage lane, but I want to talk about Monangai for a second, because I think, given the fact that he's going to be like 67%, it's worth really talking about this, and I think the conversation kind of perfectly relates to Ryan's thoughts on Caleb Williams and that stack as a whole, and my thoughts. And that is where I want to start is if Monangai was in this role for the next, let's say, 8 to 10 weeks. What do you think his average fantasy points per game would look like? 15, 16, 13? Yeah. What do you think?
That's kind of the median. Yeah, like that's what I'd be looking at. So we're putting a median projection on somewhere in that range. I think that's what it would be like. There's a possibility for some bad games, some 8 to 12s or something, and then some possibility for some ceilings, some 20 to 25. So, and maybe more. Maybe you can get up higher. But yeah, this is a spot play.
Okay, so the reason why I asked that is because Dallas has been the second best matchup so far this year for running backs, allowing 6 more fantasy points per game than those running backs typically produce. Cincinnati is the best matchup at plus 10.1. This is an insanely good matchup. Now, that doesn't mean that we should expect every single running back moving forward to average 10 more than they typically produce. It also doesn't mean that that's going to be, the number for the rest of the season. If this was a purely predictive metric, we'd probably be regressing it down to, I don't know, +6, +7, something like that. But that still means if you take that baseline of, I think Monangai in this role is worth 14, 15, 16 DraftKings points per game. And now you talk about this matchup, you're starting with like almost an expectation over 20 because of the matchup. Now, that's not where projection models are going to put him. Ours, I think I did a pretty conservative estimate all around for him, including getting some other guys involved. And we still have him at 17.5. So all of this is essentially to say, to me, Monangai is probably the highest probability play that we've seen all season from anybody. I don't necessarily think we need to deviate from that. And when you look at this matchup, it's like, the Cincinnati defense is terrible, but they're terrible in such an extreme way where all of the production is coming from running backs and tight ends. Wide receiver ones have averaged 2 fewer fantasy points per game against the Bengals than they average. Wide receivers as a whole are down 2.2 fantasy points per game against this team. Quarterbacks are only up 3 fantasy points per game. So it's just this like really weird dynamic that, yeah, this defense is awful, but it's a phenomenal matchup for 2 positions and actually pretty neutral for everybody else. So to me, like just trying to play this in a contrarian way, you're trying to leverage the highest probability, least fragile thing that the field is doing. That's not the way that I like to build. I want to attack the most fragile. I want to attack the field where they're most vulnerable. And to me, the Monangai play isn't that.
Yeah, I like that call. And Ryan sort of circled back on his stuff and said, I'm all in on him. And if he fails, I move on to next week. Caleb struggled versus shitty teams, etc. But yeah, different caveats, and that's good. So I like to see that after the previous comment, we brought it up where it was kind of just trying to tie them together and to show the thinking that goes behind it, right? And you've got that covered. So good stuff there. Love to see that. The other thing I want to say is think about the Puka Nacua week when he was like, what was he, 7,300 or whatever? Even if on a wide receiver week at that time, again, slate dynamics matter and everything, all the perspectives, that was even a week in single entry. We were like, honestly, we're just going to figure it out elsewhere and just stick with that. That's why it's funny. Now, putting Caleb with Monangai is a way to get different still, where you like add them together because most might be trying to go one or the other. And then it allows still for a more balanced build. You could still go stars and scrubs and get a little bit different if you find someone cheaper down low that you like and try and pick up the whole end zone. But trying to just completely fade him and leverage him in single entry is obviously not really ideal, to your point. And then also the setup of, if you look at the slate as a whole, that's just kind of like a spot. There's so many ways to get different. And because of his price, matchup, all the stats that you mentioned, there's still so many ways to get different with those 8 other spots. Nobody says you have to go because you're going him. It's not the same argument always for Jamar Chase, a wide receiver. We've seen tons of times where it doesn't come through for a high-end wide receiver. Same thing goes for CMC. CMC can do his CMC thing and put up 23 to 25. Is that going to be enough when there is all these other options? Or what if some of those other cheaper options put up 20, but the Justin Jeffersons of the slates and guys like that actually have a big game in a back and forth? Amon-Ra puts up 30. Justin Jefferson puts up 30. Well, bye-bye CMC in some places, right? It would be a problem at that point, or it could be a problem at that point. Okay, let's move on. One other thing I want to talk about. We're not getting out of here anytime soon. We got a lot to go through still, but Chiefs at the Bills, late swap, the setup of this slate as a whole. I mean, we literally put them on the thumbnail, so we weren't not having this conversation. Really want to dig into this one and get your thoughts on it because it doesn't actually look like much ownership is going to anyone outside of Rice, which is interesting. And then also, so why do you think that is? And then what is your sort of way of handling this? Because this is like the opposite of the Indy situation, where if it's not going to be Jonathan Taylor, it's still a offense that has shown ability to score plenty of points with a bad defense that can get some back and forth to make it speed up. And then on top of it, it's very condensed for the most part after that. You won't always get it right, and Josh Downs will beat your Pierce, or Pierce will beat your Josh Downs, or whatever it looks like, yes, can happen. But the joke of #NeverMahomes, the joke of it's not that different on the Josh Allen side some weeks when you've got James Cook, Shakir, Colvin, Kincaid, Knox, name them all. It's tricky. Is that why you think less people are on this spot, or do people just think it's going to be more defensive? What's sort of your thoughts on this Bills Kansas City Chiefs game?
Yeah, I think it's about the difficulty of predicting who succeeds if they do have success, particularly on the Buffalo side. It's just so hard on a slate where it feels like every play is a high probability play that the field is using. It's so hard to say, okay, I'm going to use Keon Coleman and risk the 1.4 fantasy point performance that he gives you every other week, it seems. So it's really hard to get into the game that way. And then also, I think you alluded to it as well, it's just these teams are good defensively, right? Like they're not a good matchup for anybody. The best, I think, argument is, okay, we have really seen Josh Allen produces his huge fantasy performances when he gets pushed, when he plays the Lions, when he plays Mahomes, things of that nature. So that to me is the allure, but it also means that's the side that is even harder to predict, right? If you're going through Mahomes, you at least can say, okay, I'm playing Rashee Rice. And then you can probably play Worthy or Kelsey and feel decent about it. You really can't feel good about anyone that you're pairing with Josh Allen. And I think the field is just smart enough now these days to say, I don't need to play Josh Allen as a one-off and then figure it out from there, because now you just have to get every other position correct. And it's so much harder to do that when you're uncorrelated. So yeah, it's not a game that is going to be very high owned, but it's also not a game that I therefore am very interested in. I just think it's way too hard to get the game right. And I also think that because of the prices, like just because Josh Allen has this enormous ceiling because of the matchup and the way Kansas City might push him, doesn't mean he's a better play relative to price than a Jackson Dart or Drake May or Daniel Jones or so many of these other quarterbacks who are just a lot cheaper. So I don't have a ton of interest in the game. I think the place I'm most interested in from that game is Kareem Hunt, though, and just saying, hey, he's not the sexiest cheap running back, but how many running backs on this slate have a better chance of scoring twice? Like, he's already been the red zone guy for this team, and now there's no question that he's going to be on the field in the red zone. I also think that because of the matchup, like Kansas City, they don't play running backs for explosiveness. They don't play running backs for who's the best runner. They play running backs for who do we feel is the most reliable? Who can we count on the most back there? And that's Hunt, right? Like Rashard Smith is still learning the position. Hunt's going to get a ton of opportunity in this game. So if you told me that he had 60 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 receptions for 40 receiving yards, I would say, yeah, that's well within his range of outcomes. And you're going to be very, very happy with that at $4,700, even if you're playing him alongside of another guy. Like I wouldn't play him instead of, but with him, I think he's a great play. And now you're kind of freed up to do whatever you want at the wide receiver position. Maybe it's a double stack of, Matt Stafford, and you're really putting those savings to good use.
I think it's a good idea to think about the defenses here too. If you're not involved in this game, like you definitely think there's a possibility that could be the way it goes. It's a little more grind of a, someone, I think it was our guy Ryan again in the chat said it feels kind of like it could be a playoff game where we actually see what people expect. And even though it's funny because if people expect it to be like a high powered offense back and forth, you'd think there'd be more love here. I know the pricing on the quarterbacks, people are starting to catch on to that. Is like, it's tricky when you also don't know who to pair them with fully, but on top of the fact that they're over 7K, the other stuff makes it all work. Again, the more you go to a 7K quarterback, the less you go to multiple 8K wide receivers, running backs, etc. So I get that angle of it as well. I think it's pretty interesting for late swap, though. Like if you did sort of have stuff not go your way in the morning and you needed to go somewhere, you'd kind of want to think about this as a potential, regardless of. Just remember, if it can be a defensive battle, it can also be an offensive. We said to think about all those Thursday night football games. Oh, this game's going to absolutely suck. They're not going to even score points. It's going to be horrible. Oh, wait, it's 37-34, and these two guys just went off and had a crazy back and forth. It can happen. It's football. So if that was – go ahead.
To that point, to that late swap point, to me, the perfect thing is we've got a $3,900 Rams defense against Shook for New Orleans, who look, maybe he's better than Rattler, but he also might be awful. He might be just like this phenomenal defensive matchup. So you could start with like Hunt and the Rams. And then if you need to get different, you go, I don't know, Raiders and Brock Bowers, something like that. Raiders and, or Jags and Travis Etienne, something along those lines. So I think that's a really, really good call. And I think like to that point, you're not just using late swap from within this Kansas City Buffalo game, but you're recognizing, okay, there are 3 games. How can I make late swap, involve this last game, but also, include one of the other 2 4:00 games. So I think that's a really kind of just a good thing to keep in the back of your mind as you build lineups of, oh, I've got this potential 2v2 or 3v3 that I can always come back to if I can find a way to fit it in all these like various stacks and such.
Yeah. I like the call of something like if you had Hunt and Rams in the late game, like you said, maybe it's like a Bowers and Bills. You double it down, right? Yeah. People would have Hunt. You've got the Bills now, which could affect his output. And then on top of it, you'd be able to pick up a big ceiling play with a guy like Bowers. Yes, it needs to come through, but it's like, what he's capable of if he has one of those games. So that would be a huge difference maker in your lineups if you needed to sort of get there from behind. I think the other thing too is like, there's 11 games on this slate, not 10 like we've previously seen in these other weeks, yet there's only 3 games in the afternoon. And a lot of the decisions will be happening in the morning based on how these certain plays like McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, Monangai, all the other stuff that we'll talk about, throughout. So last thing on the Hunt thing, just before we move on, I got one more spot and then we'll get to our lane at the end. Just on Hunt, I'm like, even with boosting his projections some, like, I don't know what you have him at right now, but it just doesn't seem like he's fitting the mold, even though this is a really good matchup on paper. If you're interested in the spot, you're interested in the Chiefs total, there's no Pacheco, there's all these factors. What do you think it is about this situation where we're just not seeing the boost in projection, which obviously then relates to the ownership? It correlates perfectly. So why are you thinking that it's not as high on Hunt as it is on some of these other options? I know Monungai, leave him out. We've already had that conversation.
Yeah, so I think it's two things. Number one, it's the fact that
I'm going to cut you off. Is this it? You said I think it's two things. This guy came right out of the gate. Go ahead.
No, I don't think it's that. I think, well, to a degree, to me, it's not that Hunt sucks. It's that he has no explosive play potential like whatsoever. So because of that, you're never going to get that like super spike efficiency week from him where he averages 7.5 yards per carry, because how do guys end up averaging 7.5 yards per carry? It's not by running for 7.5 yards every play. It's running for 4 and then 3 and then 29 and then 61, things of that nature, right? So you're not going to get that kind of a spike from efficiency standpoint. But also, the Chiefs aren't going to say, okay, we don't have Pacheco, we're going to give Hunt all of the carries that Pacheco would have had as well. They're going to say, we'll give Hunt a few extra, but we're also just going to throw the ball more. So pass rate should go up for Kansas City, which I think really doesn't hurt Kareem Hunt too much, because again, Hunt is not going to get there because he has this massive rushing yard total. Hunt is going to get there because he, instead of catching one ball, catches 4 or 5. So the more they're passing, like, that's good. But mostly it's going to get there because they score multiple touchdowns and he scores multiple touchdowns. So it's one where like the median outcome, the projection that you see, it's not going to do as good of a job with him as other guys of showing the way like his full distribution looks, because that distribution it's almost spiky. It's like, you know, he's going to give you a very similar amount probably from a yardage and reception standpoint week to week, but then you're going to go blocks of 6. Does he score once? Does he score twice? Does he score 3 times? Or does he not score? And that's really kind of the deciding factor for him. Whereas for most other guys at the running back position, it's like, you know, you don't know if you're getting 8 points from yardage and receptions or 25. Hunt, you can be pretty confident you're getting between, like, I don't know, 8 and 16, 8 and 15, something like that. So yeah, it's just, he's so incredibly touchdown dependent, but he also happens to play for an offense that can score a lot of touchdowns, and therefore he does still have upside.
That's what I laugh a little bit about too, is because I think part of this is also the fact that it's the same as we usually see. Oh, there's no way Hunt can get in and score 2 touchdowns again this week. That was so lucky how this happened last week. Was it really so lucky that Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs offense lands inside the 5-10 yard line very often? No, that's going to happen a lot. Yes, there's variance and tons of it to the fact that it ends up being Hunt that gets in, but it could happen again, first of all, because of the first part that we just said. But the second part is now you remove one of the other options that it could have been. People last week begging for Pacheco to get in. I had another close call on the Monday Night Football show. I won the $33 and in a 4-way chop for $20K, and I got the second best lineup that I lost on the Mariota interception with 12 seconds left. But I said Kareem could be the Kareem rises to the top tonight because, it's got to be Rashard Smith week, and there's Pacheco there. It's like, he's back. He's healthy. He can definitely fall in the box. The week we said that Dowdle doesn't need to score 200 again and get 200 yards the next week again and can still do good. He came back and got another 200 and did really good. We've said it about certain other guys throughout this year. So it can definitely happen. I think that's something that you need to remember. And I think that's part of people's thought process, plus just so many other options. The last thing I've got, and then I'll kick it to you for final thoughts before we get to leverage lane, is just tight ends as a whole. Let me just run this list real quick. Kelsey as a potential piece in that game, as well as we've talked about the sort of the onesie position before, where his, certain value wide receivers or value running backs might not be enough, but his at a onesie position could be more than enough to take it out. Now this week, it's got to be probably a decent number because there's a lot of other options here, but let me just name this quick. Kelsey, Kittle, Laporta, Tucker Kraft, Tyler Warren, Gadsden, Bowers, Kincaid, and then the cheapies like Theo Johnson, Henry. There's others beyond that. How are you thinking about the tight ends this week? Because I've never had a week where I loved so many, but I do kind of love them more in their stacks. Like, because we're talking single entry here, so you got to be a little bit, cognizant of that. But in general, when people are building their portfolios, I think it's a lot of tight ends in the mix this week that go with their quarterbacks and stacks and run backs and different things. But how are you thinking about the tight end position as a whole, just to round this out?
Well, I think you nailed it by saying kind of attach it to the stack, because our chances of like tight end is always a volatile position. And now we're also talking about a collection of tight ends who the thing we like about them is the upside. It's not that Kittle and Bowers and Tucker Kraft have been like super consistent. It's that, man, when they hit, they give you a wide receiver like ceiling. So your chance of just out of the blue picking those guys correctly, picking the right one or even the right two, like I said, you can go double tight end this week. Because I want to talk about double tight end just for one second here.
Yeah, that's worth it for sure.
Yeah, the reason why I typically hate double tight end and think it's an awful strategy, and you can look at the data and see like double tight end lineups have really performed poorly over the years. It's because whenever you use two tight ends, it's the same concept that we talked about. Like if you're using a wide receiver in the flex, you have 4 different flex wide receivers. It's the same idea. If you have Kittle in your tight end spot and Juwan Johnson in your flex spot, and you say, therefore, I'm only asking Juwan Johnson to beat the $3,200 wide receivers. No, you're also asking Kittle to beat the wide receivers and the running backs in his price range, because you could have put him in the flex instead. But this week, if you compare pricing, like the tight end pricing is crazy, crazy low.
Yeah.
You're comparing Kittle and Bowers at $48,000 and $5,000 to $4,800 and $5,000 wide receiver and running backs. We do have the running backs this week who really work there, but there are not anywhere near as many wide receivers worth a damn in that range as there are tight ends. Like there are guys that I like Alec Pierce again, I really like, but just like think of the expectation there. Who's more likely to give you 15 or 20? It's clearly Kittle, Bowers. Maybe you can make an argument that Pierce is more likely to get to 25 because Pierce can catch that 60-yard touchdown so often. But yeah, it's double tight end is a lot more in play this week because of the pricing. It's putting these guys in an actual advantageous situation over the similarly priced running backs and wide receivers. So going back to your point, like because it's so hard to pick the correct one of these guys, there are so many of them. I think the way to do it is you just say, which stack am I trying to elevate with the tight end getting there? So whether that's Warren, Kittle, I think like Mac Jones stacks are probably even an interesting way to build the slate, or just kind of betting on offense as a whole. Like if you have Jackson Dart, I think one interesting way to do a Jackson Dart lineup would be Dart, Wandale, Slayton. You leave out Theo Johnson, and then you bring it back with both Kittle and McCaffrey, and you say, okay, what happens if the Niners put up 35 points? McCaffrey scores 3 times on the ground, so it's not going to be Mac Jones. But now Jackson Dart is put in a position where he has to throw all game. Tracy might fail in that regard. Now Wandale Robinson might catch 10 balls, and hopefully Slayton gets a big play or two as well. So, like to me, that's the kind of way we want to think about the tight end position, and also think about the stacking as a whole. Is just what situation puts my quarterback in a position to separate, and how does that affect the entire game?
Yeah, and Tucker Kraft, somebody said, is like popping off the page, sure, because obviously the game he just had, you think about that, there's other factors to thinking about the game that he just had, but I like this one here, red zone Hunt. Yeah, like this is the whole point. No way Hunt could do this again, but you're talking about the Chiefs being in the red zone. Now, just extrapolate that out, and then you're talking about one less option to run with in the end zone with Pacheco. Not that he did a bunch anyway. There's some cases they try to make it work, but just they do go to Hunt there, and that's fine. So I think that's something that's important to remember. Envious says, I love the tight ends this week. Certainly agree on that. I mean, this is a great spot. Freiermuth healthy for sure. Definitely think this is possible, but it makes it really tricky. Like I said, when you've got 3 other options there, and then you got Metcalf and Calvin Austin and Wilson and Warren, whoever, it's just a trickier spot, but at least you could go with it. If you're going to go with it, go with it. That's part of staying in your lane. And if that's what you like, maybe you play him instead of Warren. And if you think others are getting to Warren and that's your piece that you go to instead at a onesie position, I don't hate it. Anything else we missed, Alex? Anything else you want to cover before we get to our lane to end this thing?
Nope, I think we got it.
All right, I'm giving you the honors this week because I kind of am stuck on a couple. So if you take one, I've got another. So I'll let you run with it this week. You've got the honors. And for those that don't know, this is the final segment. We use everything we've taken from throughout the show. That's what makes it a little bit different. We really do walk through the slate. Think about the if this, then that, the what ifs, the what does this mean that leads to that. We put it all together, make sure we've got the common build figured out and ways to leverage it. And then at the end, we talk about what our leverage lane is. It could be a stack, secondary stack, a certain roster construction type. We hit on a lot of them throughout the show too, so I'll recap some. But give us your leverage lane for this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially like, a lot of shows around the industry kind of end the show with their favorite play on the slate, but the whole thing that we're talking about is like, it's not necessarily about the specific place. It's the way that you play them. It's how you approach the lineup as a whole. So we close out with our favorite way to kind of, start a lineup or way to think through a lineup. Mine is going to be, I almost could go really vague here and just say like triple stacks in general, but I'm going to go specific, and I'm going to go 2 Daniel Jones triple stacks. Once again, I think the most important piece is Alec Pierce, because when Daniel Jones really has that ceiling performance, it's likely going to be because he has at least one explosive passing touchdown. Like, just think, last week, Jonathan Taylor broke an 80-yard touchdown run. What if that was an 80-yard touchdown pass? It's going to Alec Pierce. It changes the slate. But the kind of theme in general here is, I already brought this up, but like, what happens when we finally have a week where Jonathan Taylor doesn't score multiple touchdowns? Daniel Jones has been putting up low to mid 20 performances all season long, even when Jonathan Taylor is stealing all of the touchdowns. When they finally have a game where the touchdown variance goes entirely Daniel Jones' way, he's probably putting up 30 to 35. He's bringing at least 3 of his guys with him, or I should say at least 2, potentially 3, potentially even 4. But the thing about that is, like, when you have a triple stack, you're not necessarily asking all 3 of them to hit in a big way. You're just dramatically improving your chances of having 2 hit in a big way. If you choose just Pierce and Pittman, for example, and Tyler Warren has the huge game, you're going, damn, I should have had, Warren instead of Pittman. If you have both, you're not guaranteed, but like your chance of having the right guy or 2 of the right guys just dramatically increases, and it's unlikely the third guy is going to totally kill you. Last week, for example, if you had Daniel Jones, Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, and Tyler Warren, you would have done really well, even with Daniel Jones not quite having a ceiling performance and with Warren failing. Why? Because Taylor and Pittman hit in such a strong way. So I really like the triples this week. I don't think I'm using Taylor. I think it's going to be Pierce, Pittman, Warren, maybe Downs will get in instead of one of those guys. The hardest part actually for me is like picking the right bring back from Pittsburgh. I like the Freiermuth call a little bit, but if I'm using Warren, I probably don't want to go to Freiermuth. Tyler Warren, I should say, not Jalen Warren, but Jalen Warren, DK Metcalf both work as bringbacks. The only issue that I have is Indy has been a phenomenal matchup for tight ends, wide receiver 2s, and wide receiver 3s. I don't want to play Calvin Austin or Roman Wilson. And as you mentioned, Tambo, like there are 3 different Steeler tight ends that we'd have to choose from. So the bring back is the hardest part, but I feel really, really good about Daniel Jones triple stacks.
And the nice thing is, where many, don't talk about this either, but it's factored in, and you can check it in the Sims, and over time people have caught on to it a little bit, but you don't need to run it back. That's the thing. So if you just like the spot and you want to run with it, if I was not picking anything, because that was one of my 2, was definitely that. One thing I was going to tie a couple things to that. One is, I said it already earlier, but I'll give it now. It's sometimes a roster construction. I think the quadruple, like the quarterback +3 is going to be the way we see it happen this week. I definitely think that's a way to get a little bit different than what most are doing. A lot are going to go Dart, Wandale, and maybe Theo and stop. They're not going to put the 4th guy in there. They're going to go to, okay, if I'm not going Jonathan Taylor, I'll go Jones, Pittman, and Warren, or stop there or something like that. I think putting these stacks together in different ways is going to be the spot. And even on the Caleb Williams spot I brought up earlier, like Caleb Williams, Manungai, Odunze, and OZ, like Olamide Zaki. What is it? Olamide Zacchaeus. I always mess up the second part of it. But anyway, you put it all together. My point being, the quad stacks are definitely out there to be had this week. And some of the pricing allows for it. So I'm going to go to another one, and I'll bring it up in a second. But the last thing I was going to say is when someone said, Tucker Kraft by far and away the best on this slate. Again, you can go with that and hope that he has the same game that he just had. He's very capable, grown man shit in that last game if you watched it. But wait, let's go back to remember watching it for a second. And who was he playing against again? And you took it with your leverage lane. It was the matchup with the Steelers. I think Tyler Warren is incredibly capable of doing the same thing here. And I mentioned it earlier, but I laughed at it. That's why I had that one sort of in the bag, is that when he was like 45, 48, people, he should be like $7,000. It's like he's getting goal line carries. He's getting everything. It's like, okay, then you must love him at 55, but yet, no, it doesn't seem that way again. So I love the whole breakdown we had earlier on the JT stuff. If you're just jumping in live now, you can go back and watch it on playback, but just think that in general is awesome to think about, where it's like, if you don't get to him because he's 9,800, totally fair and get that. But then start thinking about the next level. Okay, are they going to put up points or not? Looks like they still are. Rance got it. Nope. Pittsburgh defense is bad. Yes, that's correct. And then you go from that and say, okay, now would it be condensed enough that I could find a way to get to it? And even if that is the case, Alex's leverage lane, is there a way I can get to it that's different and really take on this slate? And I think there is, because won't elaborate further on it, but obviously the setup, because you already gave the whole slate, the stack, but obviously what does that allow you to do with the rest of your lineup? There's tons of ways that you can go from there. I had two more. I'm kind of stuck in between. So I'm actually going to get your take on these two. I'm going to commit to one, but I'm curious just on this one. I'll add it in quickly as like a bonus. What do you think about Vidal and the Chargers D? And you don't need to put the Chargers D. I think Vidal as a whole is someone that might moonwalk back himself because of the way the running back position sets up this week. But man, I was sweating $100,000 on these Titans due to late swap last week. This team is phenomenally bad. Holy smokes. Like, it is literally the worst thing to watch. And they say, oh, we want to get Cam Ward reps to see how he does. I'm like, what? You got him in at the end of the game, and you're running Wildcats when you get down to the end zone where you could actually get a chance for him to get some confidence. So what is the thought here of if you go like Vidal and Chargers D? And I bring that up because Chargers D is $100 less than the Rams, where I think, again, we'll have to wait and see, but it seems like many more people want to go there against the backup quarterback in New Orleans, which is really the rookie quarterback, but like just to check it out. What do you think about the Vidal thing? And then I'll give mine.
Yeah, I really like the Vidal play. I think I want to look at ownership there because he's one of those plays like he could end up 25%. You're like, oh man, I used Vidal 25% on this loaded running back slate, but he could also really kind of slip through the cracks and end up 10%. So because he has that really wide range of outcomes on his ownership, I will let ownership make that call. But I think if you get him at 15 or less, he's a really good play. I'm not as into the Chargers defense because I think the Rams are just as good. And I want the option of if I need to get off of a chalky defense, I can. And you can do that with late swap with the Rams. You can't do that with late swap with the Chargers. So I think the Rams just end up a better play by default. Okay.
I like it. I'm gonna, man, this is tough. So there's another one that I just like, but I don't really like it, but I'm gonna run it anyway. So I think I'm very comfortable with this. It's going to go one of two ways, really bad or really good, but I'm going to commit to it. I'm going to roll with the Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Justin Jefferson triple. Like you put those three together, you could overstack it further. There's definitely other opportunities and options right on the Lions that make it cheap enough to do a lot of the things that we've talked about. But what I'm going to commit to is Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Justin Jefferson. And I'm going to pay up at those wide receiver positions. I'm going to hope that you don't need JT. And I'm going to hope that CMC does CMC things, which this year has been 20-point games and 23-point DK point games where I can get that in different ways. I like a ton of different things about this game. I love that Detroit has almost a 30-point team total at home. And I don't know if Minnesota can push it enough, but I know that if they do, I think it's coming through Justin Jefferson getting there for, starting to have a good game finally and getting something put together that's nice. So I'm going to roll with Goff, Amon-Ra, Justin Jefferson. Thoughts on that before we get out of here, and anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, I like it. It's definitely something I'm going to test in the Sims. I'm also going to look at more Drake May stuff because I think if you can predict where that production comes from, I think that whole game could end up being really good where maybe you use London as a bring back, maybe you use Darnell Mooney and hope that finally hits. But Drake May, like himself, just projects so incredibly well for us that if he's low owned, like I want to take the chance that I can predict where it comes from because he himself has such a good chance to separate. And by the way, part of that is no Stevenson. Like, I just don't think that they're going to trust Trevion Henderson, especially in the red zone. He's not good at running the ball yet. So, he's been like something like the fifth worst running back in the next gen stats, rushing yards over expected. So I think that they could have a really high pass rate and Drake May could have a big game. So there's other stuff I want to try, but I just have a really hard time believing anything is going to be as good as Daniel Jones triples. So that's probably where I'm going to end up.
One thing I'll say on that then, because we're rounding it out, then I'll let you can go tell people where they can find and everything you got going on. But, if you want to mention it quick, the Bijan situation last week, right? Obviously failed everybody. The chat's talking a lot about the Bijan flop leg. I actually have more interest in London playing, and then, which sounds like I'm going London, but I'm not. You mentioned it, in going with Mooney flop leg, because everyone's worried about the bust on Bijan. Mooney was chalk, man, like super chalk. All the thought process of Mooney was, if London and Mooney play together, I kind of like Mooney, and we wanted him as a sleeper. Then last minute, London's ruled out. It boosts both their ownership. Bijan fell the hardest, if you want to call it that. And people are like, oh, Mooney's just an afterthought. But you wanted Mooney's ass if that was the situation. So to me, if you are leveraging the Henderson stuff, who knows what he even actually gets to, because there's so many running backs on the slate. But you said it. It is hard to get right, but because it could be Pop Douglas who breaks it, or it could be Mac Hollins again, or something stupid. But if you just want to stick with our quad thought, you could go May, Diggs, Booty, Henry, and use Mooney on the way back and do it that way. And I don't know. I had the spacesuit on for Halloween for the kids last night, and on the Thursday show, I had the full astronaut get up on. Maybe we go to the moon with Darnell this week in that little back and forth, because Drake May has been the real deal. I'm not sure if you saw some of the stats. I know you dig in pretty heavily, but looking at some of the stuff of like Bo Nix and what he's doing versus Drake May, and also how Drake May's stuff seems a lot more traction there, or what seems realistic for moving forward versus the Bo Nix stuff. But just noting, it's not them two versus each other. I just thought that was interesting to see. But Drake May has most certainly been the real deal, and 6,500 with receiving core that's 5,700 and below for anything you want to add to it makes it pretty nice. Any final thoughts on that? And then let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, I agree there. It's been a week of props for me. So I had like I mentioned, my worst NFL Sunday of props in a year and a half. And then Monday hit on a Kareem Hunt to kind of get back on track and hit a 3-pick play over an underdog on the NBA side of things. And then Tuesday went 8 for 8 on NBA props, hit for $27,000, my best prop day. And then had more hits yesterday, kind of setting up a potentially a good week over an underdog for NFL too. So it's been an awesome week over in my Discord from the Pick'em and Props perspective. If anyone is interested in that kind of stuff, you can find it through my Twitter at Alex Blickle1. I know a lot of people have kind of come over from Leverage Lane, and it seems like everyone's really enjoying both the Discord, and also everyone who is already in the Discord is really enjoying all of the people who have come from Leverage Lane. We all very clearly think about DFS in the same way. We love DFS, and maybe we love props and Pick'em as well.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely check that out. It's a nice add-on piece. I know, I don't know if you saw this too, Alex. We just did a deal here. I'm going to throw it up quick, but we've been working with Splash, which has a ton of quick pick stuff and things like that. And for NBA and NFL, it'd be a great pairing to use code SHIPIT over at Splash, get your deposit bonus, get the 100% payout boost on your first quick picks entry. They have a ton of boosts going on, but then you could go over with Alex and get his prop stuff and be able to apply that directly to Splash. So, Alex would get taken care of. You'd be using SHIPIT. You'd be putting it all together. That's really what these collaborations are all about. So check out Alex over on X, as well as in his Discord for SHIPIT. The promo right now is simple. It's if you haven't been with us, or you want to check us out, or you're somewhere else and you're trying to see if you want to add us or jump over, you can do it for 5 days. And that's going to get you all the action. We've got MMA, we've got college football today, we've got the Game 7 of the World Series, NBA Classic and Showdown, NFL tomorrow, Monday night. You'll get all the stuff throughout this weekend, but you get 5 days for just $19. So check it out. Go to shipitnation.com, use code SHIP19. We appreciate you all. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to smash the thumbs up button, subscribe to this channel for all the free shows moving forward, and put your comment in the leverage lane. What's your leverage lane this week? Who are you going with? Thank you guys. For Alex, for myself, ToeTagginTambo, let's ship it.